We remember the day the stars answered, the day we learned we were not alone.
So, you've fired up Terra Invicta. You're starting your first playthrough. Where do you begin? A few things in this video to help you get started. My name is Stealth17. I run a series on Terra Invicta, as well as I have a few tutorial videos coming up on this game, and I'm going to help you get underway. First things first, if you're playing the first game, the first round if you will, I do recommend you start with the Resistance because it has a tutorial built in. The game is extremely deep, extremely detailed, has a ton of parameters, and the tutorial will at least help you get going. You fire up the game for the first time, with the tutorial going, it's going to allow you a lot of information. So much information, in fact, that you might get overwhelmed. In fact, you're very likely to get overwhelmed. You see, Terra Invicta is an extremely deep and detailed game. And this means that your brain is going to be flooded with information. You're going to be taking on a lot of new knowledge, resources, skills, and let's say gameplay mechanics such as Delta V in space, building stuff in orbit, orbital mechanics. You're going to be a little overwhelmed. And that's fine. Expect disaster. This is good when learning any new skill. Expecting disaster, expecting things to fail, and that's fine. You're learning a new skill, you're learning a new game, and, well, it might sound a little weird, but it might mean that the game in the first few hours is not fun. You might be annoyed, you might be frustrated, you might be going, damn, why isn't this working? And that's fine. Give yourself the freedom to learn and experiment and play with the game. What I recommend you do is use this first save game of yours, this first game, as a trainer. When I did this, I named the first save game Trainer. This is going to give you a bit of a mental break. It allows you to fuck up, it allows you to break things, it allows you to go, oh shit, I'm just getting ruffle stomped by the AI. And it's fine, it's a trainer. Now, the game is going to overload you with information about resources, about second tier resources, about objectives, but at least the UI is going to be explaining a lot of stuff for you using the tutorial. So, using all of this, go through it. Go through the resources that you have. Go to the Discord, linked down below in the description, where you can ask questions with other players who might have a bit more experience, or who just happen to know the answer to your questions. If you're a bit lost and you don't know what to do, click on the objective on the top left-hand side. For my case, I'm using the Resistance as the example because it's the only faction with the tutorial. Click on Objectives and it's going to tell you what you need to do. In this case, for the tutorial, it's going to tell you to start assigning counselors to missions as your first objective. The game is a lot about running the clock forward. Now, the clock is on the top right-hand side. You can increase speed, you can decrease speed, and when you're ready, and that is after you have set your counselors on missions, you can play, and it's usually going to progress by a few weeks. Later on, the timescale grows even more as you're going into space. And whereas moving a counselor from one sector on Earth to another might take you as much as a day, moving a couple of ships from, for example, Earth to Mars might take you as much as a year. So expect this to be a very, very large-scale game. It's not gonna go over quickly. As for your brain being overloaded with information, I highly recommend that you take a break every once in a while. I know it can be very tempting to go for a 12-hour spree on this game, but I do not think it is beneficial. Because when you have a bit of a downtime, in a sense, your brain gets the time to process your new information. And that means that if you play the game, just put it away for a few hours and then pick it up again. And you're going to look at the game and you go, oh, right. So if I look at priorities and I set more to Unity, that's going to do that for my strategy. Or if I want to be building more armies, I need to be focusing my money here. If I want to have another counselor assassinated, maybe it's better if I detain them first. You're going to start to figure things out. Also, the tech tree, I want to give you a bit of fair warning. It is extremely, extremely large. When you look at this thing first, you're going to go, Jesus Christ. This is the tech tree. It is massive. Don't expect to figure out everything in the first go. Don't expect to make it to the end game in your first save, because hey, this was just the trainer, right? This is just the practice. So allow yourself the opportunity to go for things that you find interesting with this tech tree. Of course, your objectives are going to tell you research this, research that, and I do recommend that you follow those because it's going to give you at least some idea of what to pursue. But otherwise, go for things that you find interesting, and it might just work out. Terra Invicta has a few game phases. Early game is what I consider to be a part of the game where you spend, let's say, the first in-game year, maybe first 1.5 years of in-game time. Your objective right now is to start taking over zones. Look for zones that are friendly to you. If you have a control zone or a control nation option with your counselor, look for zones which have a pretty high chance of success. And you could find that out also by having a look at the public opinion. I'm the Resistance, I have 4% popular support in the Benelux. I have, however, a lot more support in Norway for some reason. So my chance to take over Norway is a lot more increased. This is early game. You take over more and more territories. But don't go overboard. Because on the top hand here, you have a control cap. I have 123 points that I can control. This is not 123 control points, this is a cap. If you look at the control point for any particular nation, it's going to say cost against cap is, in this case, 7.06 points. So that is 7 out of my 123 points. The more that you go over this limit, the more you're going to get penalized because you'll get less influence, which is a resource that the game will explain to you and why it is important. So don't just blindly try and follow the path of least resistance and grab everything that you can. Especially Africa is usually quite easy to grab, but it doesn't have a space program. You're going to have to do a lot of work. So it might take you a bit more time to sway nations to your side. And if you have a counselor that has the public campaign, then you can do just that. More on that in the tutorial. But try and find nations which you think are interesting, which you think are aligned with your interests, and which will suit you best. After about a year, you're going into mid-game. Mid-game can look something like this. I have taken over Russia, I have taken over a couple of surrounding states of Russia, and I am starting to get more and more of a resource called Boost. If you do not have a space station yet, if you do not have the capabilities of building stuff in space, then you're going to be trying to get Boost, because it is your ability to fling stuff into space. First into low Earth orbit, and then potentially all the way to the moon. Once you get to the moon, you can start mining resources, but more on that in a little bit. At this point, I have taken over control of Russia, and this is part of my playthrough series, so if you look for some more examples, linked down below is the playthrough series. I have taken over control of Russia, and I have made sure that I defend my interests. This means that other factions cannot simply crack down on my area of influence and cannot remove me from my control of Russia. I recommend that you do this, and some counselors have this ability to do that. You're looking for this particular shield icon, a wall with a shield, defend interests. It's going to cost you some influence, but it will make sure that you do not lose those control points that you fought so hard to get. This is also the point where you can start going, okay, who are my other factions? Who are my enemies? And what are they doing? Look around the map a little bit. See what these different icons are. I have a different video on all the factions, their icons and their intents linked down below as well. So in this case, in Germany, I can see that the Academy has full control over Germany, and they have definitely defended their interests as well. The Benelux, however, is being controlled by Project Exodus. And after about, actually less than a year, it's more like half a year of in-game time, nobody has yet taken control of the USA, nor of China. It's both empty here. This is because these are very, very difficult to control, yet if you do manage to control them, they're extremely powerful. But keep in mind, we have that control cap, and you only have, you only have so much. If you want to control the whole of China, you can, but it's going to cost you almost your entire cap, so expect to have no other territories. Mid-game is also where you start building stuff in space. At some point, you're going to be able to do this depending on your research tier, and it's going to give you a little button over here that says, I want to build a platform. Now, these early platforms are mostly for doing research, and you can set them up on different orbital regions. As low as 500 kilometer range around Earth, or as high as 735,800 kilometers. The higher you go, the more boost, as earlier discussed, it's going to take. So going for a low Earth orbit with a cheap research station is going to help. Now when you build one of those platforms, the game is going to go, okay, you can do that, but if you want to keep this thing in orbit, you're going to pay some resources. That's one of these 5 resources, and usually a combination. It's resources that you simply don't have. So the game is going to compensate that by using more boost. And that boost is going to reduce the amount of monthly and annual income that you have. So pick wisely where you want your first station to go. I recommend a low Earth orbit and making sure that you have a simple station there which is just capable of doing some research is perfectly fine. Because getting a research a head start, making sure that you get more research going than the other factions is very valuable. In the late game, you're running around with spaceships. These ships can turn into fleets, and these fleets can turn into devastating weapons. Now, again, you're facing orbital mechanics. That means that these ships have a certain amount of reach. This is Fleet Romeo 1. This is from the tester scenario that you can just open up yourself if you go to the new game selector and don't go for the full scenario, the modern scenario, but go for the space test scenario. This is going to allow you to play around with space mechanics and see what does what. In this case, I have Fleet Romeo 1. You can see that they have a Delta V, that's the triangle and the V on the bottom right hand side that says 33.4 out of 33.4 kps. This is essentially how far they can go. Now, it doesn't mean that they can go 33,000 kilometers or 33,000 or 33 million kilometers or something like that. But it means that they can get to some points and they cannot get to some other points. If you want to transfer them to a different station, fleet or orbit, for example, I want to go to Victor 1, which is in low Earth orbit. It's going to take me 2.5 hours to get there, and I don't need a lot of my Delta V. I only need 2 out of 33. If you want to get to high Earth orbit, you're looking at 17.9 out of 33. So this fleet might be more geared towards defending Earth, because going anywhere else, well, you might not be able to come back. There's also a gateway station and Archon station, and as indicated by these fuel stations, you can get fuel once you get there. Keep in mind that if you're going into late game, the timescale is going to develop a lot. Because if I want to get to, let's say, an orbit around Mercury, if I can even get that far with this fleet, and I'm not sure. I don't think so, actually. Let's say I want to get to Mars. If I want to get to Mars, I need 30 out of my 33 kps Delta V. So it's going to be a one-way trip. I can get there, but I cannot get back. Fuel in space is critical. And late game, you're going to be setting up more and more stations to refuel. As you can see, around Mercury, there seems to be a station, as owned by Project Exodus, Valkyrie Station. So getting to a station that you have might just allow you to refuel your fleet and keep it going. The space stations that you see here are nothing like the ones that you see in early game. These things are significantly larger, stronger, potentially armed and armored, and can take on a fleet. Be careful when you're selecting where you build, because they're becoming significant investments. But as you have resources coming in, these tier 2 resources, they're also going to be, well, relatively easier to build, because you don't need boost, you can simply build them in space. Right, so that's mid-game, early game, late game, and everything in between. Of course, your ultimate objective will vary from faction to faction. In this tester scenario, I'm playing as the Resistance, so it is going to be my objective to use Fleet Romeo 1 to take out the alien threat, or take out, well, whatever happens to be standing in my way. If you're playing as Operation Exodus or Project Exodus, you might be trying to leave the solar system, which means you might not need as many armed warships, you just need to try and get the fuck out, essentially. If you're playing as another faction, such as maybe the Initiative, you're trying to grab control for yourself over Earth. Do you even need spaceships? I don't know. It's going to depend on your strategy and your strategy alone. To conclude, Terra Invicta is a game. Treat it as such. Have fun with it. If you don't have fun with it for a minute, put it down and go do something else. If you have fun with it, that's the ultimate objective of the game. Expect to make mistakes in your first playthrough, maybe your first playthroughs. Experiment to your heart's content, and eventually, when they're becoming available, go and have a look at mods. Because the game has inbuilt mod support, which is going to allow for a lot of creativity from the community. It's going to allow for greater replayability, and it allows you to customize your game to your ultimate desire. If you have any questions, try and get them answered on the Discord from Terra Invicta. They can definitely give you better answers than I can. And if you haven't picked the game up yet, then by all means try and do so through my link down below in the description and the pinned comment, because you'll be directly supporting myself and my channel in making further content on Terra Invicta. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon for more videos.